I'm here this afternoon also with Clare Lopez, and you're with us, Center for...
I'm Vice President for Research and Analysis at the Center for Security Policy, working with Frank Gaffney and the team there. We are in the 30th year this year, our anniversary year, 30th anniversary year at the center.
Awesome, awesome. You've got a different perspective on what's going on with the FISA, or maybe not a different, but an additional bit of information or perspective. Share what's on your mind in regards to what's been happening.
Sure. Well, what's becoming known now as Stategate, hashtag Stategate, is consuming Washington, D.C. and the media these days, of course. So the long-awaited memo, a 4-page unclassified memo put together by the House Intelligence Committee and its chairman, Representative Devin Nunes, who really is just one of the absolute heroes of this whole episode, was released to the public just earlier this week. And what that memo is based on is a set of classified intelligence documents. So the memo drew on the classified documents but produced a 4-page summary memo that's not classified, and the President and the Intelligence Committee and the House decided to release it to the public. And so what is in there is really damning of the misuse and the abuse of the most powerful agencies of the U.S. government. And what happened essentially is outlined in that memo. So what it appears is that senior leadership figures within the FBI and the Department of Justice use the FISA court process, that is Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and the court process for obtaining warrants for surveillance. An initial request was put in October 2016. It was renewed 3 times after that, which means that that period of time covered not only the pre-election period, but the post-election November 8, 2016 period, when Donald Trump is now the president-elect, and even on into the early weeks of his presidency. So the FBI and the Department of Justice weaponized the FISA process to go after a political candidate, a president-elect, and now President Donald Trump of the United States. That is an abuse of power that goes beyond anything we have seen in recent times. And what they did is relied upon a collection of information brought together by a former British intelligence officer by the name of Christopher Steele, who was hired by a law firm that was hired by a company called Fusion GPS, that was hired by Hillary Clinton and the Democratic National Committee during a campaign, during a political campaign season. So in other words, what we're saying is, what we now know is that the dossier compiled by Christopher Steele from Russian sources, unvetted Russian sources, formed a key element of the FBI Department of Justice request to the FISA court for the warrant for surveillance against members of the Trump team and transition team and then administration. And the FBI and the Department of Justice senior leadership figures, officials who submitted the FISA request and then the follow-up 3 requests after that had to have known that the information contained in the dossier, which forms such a key critical part of the FISA request, was not only unverified, unvalidated, uncorroborated, but as then FBI Director Comey actually said in open testimony before Congress, it was salacious and unverified. And yet, the FBI officials, knowing that, submitted that dossier as part of their FISA court request for surveillance, knowing that they were deceiving the FISA court judges who then granted the FISA warrant to conduct surveillance on the Trump administration figures. In particular, one very low-level individual, what is his name? The FISA court warrant was obtained essentially under false pretenses. And not only under false pretenses, but they knew it was false, or at the very minimum, salacious and unverified, as FBI Director Comey himself said in open testimony before Congress. And that is the corruption of what is really an essential tool of the U.S. government, the FISA court, the ability to obtain permission for warrants against those who would do us harm. Intelligence of hostile foreign powers, for example, who would do harm to the United States. That's what it's for.
Yeah.
That's what it's needed for. But they corrupted it to crass political campaign purposes, essentially driven by Hillary Clinton and the Democratic National Committee and that political campaign for presidency against another political campaign, their opponent's campaign, Donald Trump's.
And that's what now President Trump has said all along.
He was absolutely right. I think that he was obtaining information as some of this investigation was going forward. And of course, he knew. He knew what was going on. He was absolutely correct. I'll name one other hero in this whole story, and it is Mike Rogers, retired Admiral Mike Rogers, who has been the director of NSA, National Security Agency, who early in the transition period, shortly after the November 8 election 2016, when Trump and the transition team were still operating out of Trump Tower in New York City, found out, that is, Admiral Mike Rogers found out that the transition team and Donald Trump were being surveilled, were being put under unlawful, as we now know, surveillance. Mike Rogers, to his credit, went to Trump Tower and warned the president-elect.
Wow.
And the very next day, Trump moved his entire transition team out of Trump Tower to other locations to continue the transition work.
Wow, that was truly compromising the security of our nation and all of that during that transition time.
Yeah, it really was. And the thing is, just as you were saying before, the president did find out about it, especially, from the tip-off from Admiral Mike Rogers at the NSA, and that was critically important, because again, you not only then had a political party apparatus and its candidate Hillary Clinton using the powers of the United States government to try to stop, to try to defeat the presidential campaign of another American and political party, namely Donald Trump and the Republican Party. But even after he had been elected and is now president-elect, they continued to weaponize those powers of the FBI and the Department of Justice in terms of the FISA court warrant, as we now know from the memo, from the 4-page Nunes released memo, and even on into the period after Donald Trump was sworn in as president. That cabal of Hillary Clinton, the Democratic National Party Committee, and its lackeys within the top ranks of the FBI and the DOJ were using these powers now even against an elected, inaugurated president of the United States of America. That is the danger to our system. That is the threat to the republic. This has to be countered. This has to be countered legally and with prosecution in court of law, because that is directly suborning the legality and the lawful foundations of our republic.
Yeah, absolutely. Claire, thank you so much for your time today. I know we
you.
could go on because there's so many different areas that touches on too.
And more to come.
Yeah,
So stay
absolutely,
tuned.
absolutely. And we hope to have you out to San Angelo soon as well to
Thank
speak.
you. We'd love to come.
All right, thanks.